National TV.
Double dog there, you.
I don't know.
You have interest? Ready to sign up?
What was this being passed on?
That's just for everybody to look at. That's just kind of the history of the senior group.
Senior.
All right, I got 6 o'clock, so we'll open this work session. And I believe Miss Megan, are you leading this show?
I am.
Awesome.
Good evening, council. In your boxes, I gave you a large document that is, yes, that made the numbers hopefully a little bit bigger than the little screens. If you don't want to look on the computer, I know how looking at numbers on a screen can make your eyes go cross. So going through our budget and as far as what we've done and where we're at, department budget requests came in May through July, and they get compiled over that course of time where each department creates their budget from a zero-based budget, meaning they build out what they anticipate they need for the next year. During that time, if there's any additional items that are new or one-time requests, at that time they submit them through, which then it goes through the city manager and myself in order before it comes to the Budget Advisory Committee. July through September, the Budget Advisory Committee has been meeting. We've met several times, I believe 6 different times related to the budget, going over the requested items and then bringing it back to the full council for an overview. During the time when we do our estimates in July, poor Mark has to estimate where projects are going to be based upon the end of the year. So as we go through the process, it does change. And we did have a couple items that did change in the last week based upon availability, including our vac trucks. They actually, while we ordered them this year, they won't be built until next year. And so that's an item the Budget Advisory Committee did not know about because it just happened a week ago. In addition, we had a couple other carryover line items that we'll discuss when we get to the capital projects. And then now we're at the preliminary budget where we're going to go through the preliminary budget. We're actually doing a little bit different of a process this year to where we make it more official to where we actually present the preliminary budget to council and then have council set those 3 hearings for November and December to be in compliance with state law. So that will happen at the official session. And throughout this entire process, again, this is a preliminary budget, meaning if there's items that need to come out of the budget or things need to change or there's additional questions council has, then at this time, it's a working document until it's adopted in December. And even at that point in time, if something happens, then it can always be amended. The budget's a living document. It's something that's ever evolving and changing. It's based upon estimates and the information we have at the time that we make it. That being said, November through December, we are asking for the hearings to take place. And then the final budget just needs to be adopted before the end of the year in order to be in compliance and continue operations into 2025. So looking back at what the council goals were that were set back at the beginning of the year, cultivating opportunities for private economic development, ensuring long-term fiscal stability, grow public engagement, outreach, and education, continue to promote public safety and livability, improve and maintain infrastructure systems, and encourage employee development and organizational excellence. And then when we combine those with the vision that was done back in 2018, which included prosperity, community, well-being, growth, and identity, the various goals that we have can correlate to that in developing our budget, and just something to keep in mind as we go through this process of the budget. So these are the total funds for the city. And this is a familiar slide as we present it quite frequently. We have a multitude of funds, and per state law, we do have to set an appropriation for each of these funds to be in compliance. So one of the first pages in your document that you have in front of you is the preliminary budget in totality. So we have a balanced budget with total resources of 82 million and then estimated uses of 82 million. That does include using some appropriated fund balance, so balances that we have in like our capital reserve funds to pay for different things that have, it's purposeful. It's not something that we're dipping into quote unquote reserves for. It's what those intended uses of those funds are. And we'll talk about the details of those as we go through the process. So one of the first things we want to talk about is the city's largest expense, which is our personnel expenses and what is built into the budget. So for our COLAs, we do have contracted union contracts agreements that set our various COLAs. So for Teamsters for 2025, it is at 3.5%. Historically, the non-represented employees have followed the Teamsters contract, so that is what is built into the budget as well. The POA commissioned is in negotiations. I believe it comes forward in the consent for ratification this evening. And then we have the POA non-commissioned, which is also in negotiations. And then for our healthcare increases, Regents is set at 7.3% for 25, and then Kaiser, the 250 plan at 3.8%, and the high deductible plan at 3.4%. Are there any questions about the various COLAs and healthcare increases? Okay. So our next slide, we're going to talk about the employee requests for 25. Again, these are things that are kind of usually an item of discussion for the full council. So our first position we are requesting is for a police support specialist. This is in relation to the body worn cameras. This is a civil service position, which means it has to go through all the same requirements as our police officers do in order to be hired. We are asking that if council is in support of this position, that we actually get a thumbs up during the regular council meeting in order to move forward to post for the position and have it hired in January. Before I move on to the next position, is there any discussion on the police support specialist? Okay. So okay. So our next position is a court coordinator position. We initially presented this to the Budget Advisory Committee as a half-time position and potentially a full-time position. We are asking for it to be a full-time position. It would be split with the other agencies, Ridgefield and La Center. And a portion of this, the reason why it's a full-time versus a half-time is due to community court and community court coordinator having somebody actually working the cases to be driving that force. And it takes more time than our existing personnel is able to handle. In addition, our regular court sessions, our dockets are very large, and we're using external sources to cover the court day, which takes them away from other duties. For example, my accounting assistant, my front desk assists on court day, which means she's not available to help customers and help finance, and or Kelly with executive is also helping on Thursdays. And then when they're unavailable, court doesn't have the personnel available to run the court session unless they're all hands on deck. Are there questions about the court coordinator position?
I have one.
Yeah.
So when, I forget if you sent it out or someone sent it out, or if I was on the city's website for courts. We used to run courts 2 days a week pre-COVID. Our caseload was quite a bit higher pre-COVID in courts. So did we have a court coordinator then?
So back when Kay was here, she actually helped on Thursday. So there was another body in the courtroom during court days. However, due to the decision from the state, there had to be a separation between executive and judicial to where we couldn't have executive staff over court, which is why the city clerk was no longer over the court position and Carol's position, the court coordinator position, or not court coordinator. I don't remember exact titles, but Carol's position was no longer secondary. It became a manager under the judge. So the judge became that department's head. So at that time, we lost that body helping on court day, but they did used to have an additional body. And then we lost it because of that decision and have not brought it back due to the filing caseload. You're absolutely correct. The filings went down, so we were able to handle it. But with this last year, with our, in particular, Battlegrounds filings have gone up and we're back to where they were pre-COVID or very close to, and they continue to increase. And we see that Ridgefield's adding some more folks as well. So we see that forecasting going out, and there may be the potential that we do have to add a second docket day due to the filings.
Cause that's my only concern is that we're hiring based upon assumptions that this is gonna happen. When it was quite a bit, it was pretty drastic, the difference in court cases that we have now versus what we had before. I mean, I'm talking maybe we were like 65% of what we were then. And so I mean, I kind of wonder if we shouldn't start part-time to begin with, and then if it gets busier, then we ramp up personally.
As we're tracking the numbers and we only have them through September, we're higher than we were pre-COVID.
Can you send those numbers?
We had over 400 just in the month of May. And it's just tracking where, and a lot of this is coming from Battleground, but also Ridgefield. So we send those out in the weekly, but I can send you the spreadsheet that goes all the way back to
But if we go,
2003.
if we go to the numbers, I mean, I'm just going off of what we did. We had 2 full court days before COVID. We had Tuesdays and Thursdays were full court days. And
Wasn't
we,
one of them infractions? Was that?
no, they were, I don't think so. Do you remember, Adrian?
I think they were,
One was infractions and one was, yeah. But I mean, that's my only concern, because we've been down this road before with courts, whether it be attorneys and paralegals and all that stuff. And it got expensive really, really fast. And that's my only concern is we bring on full-time employees and then we're going, well, it wasn't quite what we thought it was. And then we're looking for something else for them to do.
So I'm sorry,
it back.
did we cover this about the opioid funds?
I was just going to speak to that, but I think
Okay.
Rob had
Yeah.
something.
To your point, Deputy Mayor Bowman, on the weekly report that goes out to city council, the last one, we had the court filings that were, as Chris was mentioning, for the first 9 months of 2024. There were 2,727 cases through the first 9 months. That is 50% more than 2023, and it's actually the highest number since 2019, when there were 2,784 cases for the entire year. And so typically when you look at the numbers, 2018, 2017, 2016, we're trending to be where we were pre-COVID easily.
Which I'm fine with, but pre-COVID, we didn't have this position either. That's what I'm saying is if it's warranted, I mean, if we need it, then yeah, we need it, but we didn't. That's why I asked, did we have this position pre-COVID? If it was a part-time position, do we need a full-time position for that?
So I think what you're talking is exactly why we initially said a half-time, and the other half of that time was for community court. And the plan is to use opioid funds to assist with offsetting the cost of that position with opioid funds. So we have the opioid settlement dollars available to help with drug abatement essentially, or the cause and the fallout of opioid, and community court is one of those items that we'd be able to use it for. And so half that position would be that program, which we don't have right now.
How much are we receiving in opioid funds?
So to date, we've received about 198,000, and yearly we're at about 33,000. However, we have a couple more settlement cases that we will be a part of, so that may potentially increase. It depends upon how the states come together in the different jurisdictions. I'm still waiting to hear on a couple of the settlements of when that's going to come through, and so we can join in.
I think it'd be good to get a breakdown of, you said we're here split with other agencies and the use of opioid funds. If we could get a breakdown as to what is the overall impact to the general fund outside or encompassing all those other agencies and the use of opioid funds.
Absolutely. The city right now pays about 71% because on average, because we use a 3-year rolling average of case filings. So we're paying 71% of our court. And then La Center pays a smaller portion and Ridgefield's at about 21%, I believe, right now. But yes, I can bring back a detailed of what that looks like. The opioid funds, it will be dependent upon that community court, since that's sort of an unknown at this point. The intent is to get that up and going before the end of the year, so we may have a better idea when we get there. We have about 2 months until we approve the budget that we should be able to have more information on this for what's needed, but without community court, it would just be a half-time position.
We're adding community court in addition to regular court, right? And it's gonna be a more extensive court process where people are gonna get more hands-on or more hand holding, I guess, to help them navigate through the system and how to get out of it.
Correct.
So part-time's that's kind of a lot for the person to do. So, I don't know. Seemed fine to me to split it between the two.
Looking at the numbers, just of the filings we've had this year, we're already where we were at for all of 2019. And we have 4 months left to go, 3 months left to go. So on community court, it's not really that we're dealing with additional people, but we are carving off a new docket and has to be handled separately, and we're working with the stakeholders on that. But the idea is to get these individuals that keep coming into the court, cycling in and cycling out, is just to get them to permanently cycle out. The other piece I'll add real quick is today we heard from Administrator of the Courts, AOC, that did finally render an opinion on whether the tribe can contract with municipalities. And the answer was yes. So we do anticipate entering into another, an agreement with the tribe at some point to handle their cases. Not their own tribal court, but tribal members that may get in trouble off of tribal land, if that makes sense. So it's something that's been in discussions for a long time. So that's going to add even more to our caseload.
And just so to give a perspective, so La Center, when they lost their police force, they were a bigger chunk of our court system. So the tribe is equal to what La Center used to be as far as their filing number. So it's not bringing on another Ridgefield or a larger court. They'd be about the same size as La Center. And currently, right now, they're using district court. And they would prefer to use our court, but there was a question of municipal court versus district court and powers that be, which is why the decision had to come from the AOC.
Is Ridgefield and La Center or the tribe, are they all in on the community court? Or is it just us?
Yes.
I have a related question, but I don't want to hijack conversation. Have we formed the opiate board that has to be formed in order to distribute these funds?
Yes. So that is, we entered into that a few months ago. It's with City of Vancouver. They're the lead agency, and City of Camas and Washougal. We don't have to go to them before we spend the funds. We go back to them and tell them how we spent the funds, just to check the box of the agreement of the settlement funds.
Expense account kind of. All right, thank you.
And I will put in there too that we can use the opioid funds. This doesn't have to be the only item we use opioid funds for. Again, it just has to be in the drug realm with opioids and the fallout of that. It's a very broad stroke that they gave us. We just have to put it in that wheelhouse, combating that. So that could be mental health, that can be rehab, that can be third-party counseling, all of those things, which fits in with the community court as well. So there's a potential of that too.
What's the total though? I keep.
Right now, it's about 800,000 over 17 years
800,000 over 17
Mhm.
years.
currently. It's a very slow trickle in. and some come faster. We have so much right now because Walmart paid their settlement everything at once. So they didn't spread it out over 17 years, and we may get more depending upon how those settlements come to terms.
I just want to say that I'm really excited for us to have our own community court. And it's gonna give people opportunities to advance in their lives, quit being stuck in the system. So I'm excited.
So I will definitely bring that back at our next session with that breakdown as well as more information on filings. So our next item, or our next full-time employee request is a GIS specialist, which would be split across the various public works divisions. What this does is it allows for our own mapping. Currently, we contract with Clark County to do this for us, but they are stepping out of this business and we aren't able to do the type of detail mapping that we need for various permits that we have. And Mark can speak more to the detail of what exactly a GIS specialist does.
Yeah, so GIS specialist uses the GIS software to make maps. One of the big things we've talked about is that development project map that we want on our website. So they would do things like that. For capital projects, we often, street preservation is a good example where those contain, things that this person would make. One of the big other duties is taking care of the back end of both our planning and permitting software, and then our asset management software. So our users right now use kind of the finished product, but on the back end of those products, there's ways to change them, program them, that sort of thing. That takes a bit of expertise, and we have some people on staff that do that now, but it's one of the 1,000 things they do. So having a person that's focused on that, they'll be kind of an expert in both of those. And then big thing, at least for me, is the asset piece of it. A lot of the granting agencies, people like Department of Health, Department of Ecology, who are in charge of water and sewer, they're starting to get more and more strict about making sure you have all your assets mapped, that you're going through a process, useful life, those sorts of things. And so this kind of position would be a catch-all to take care of all of those various things.
What are other cities doing? If the county's not doing this, what's Ridgefield doing?
I'm not sure what Ridgefield's doing, but I know City of Camas has their own GIS coordinator. It's becoming more common for, I think, as you get over a certain threshold of size, that you need your own in order to essentially operate this whole thing. And I'm not sure what the other smaller agencies are going to do.
Do you feel it's something that the reason I ask is if Ridgefield needs one, is it something where they could share with us?
Yeah, I mean, we have the GEM agreement, so that essentially allows us to do work for other agencies. So it would be easy to, and honestly, we have kind of billing rates for others. So we've done work for the school district, we've done work for Ridgefield, we've, done work elsewhere. So it kind of be a similar thing where, if they have one off that we could use it to, I don't see quite like court where it's like a standard percentage, but anytime they need that help, we could offer it. And that's another item before the next meeting. I can find out what Ridgefield does for that, as well as Washougal for their GIS specialists. And then our last two positions are existing positions. They were initially brought on as temporary positions for 2-year terms, but they are both slated to end at the end, well, towards the end of next year. And we're asking to make them regular and not temporary. Just as a reminder, when we have FTEs in the position or in the budget, that doesn't mean that it precludes them. It's not that they're permanent positions. If we have a budget shortfall and we need to do cuts, we never like to talk about cuts, but if we need to do cuts, ultimately, it doesn't mean that they're permanent. It just takes off the temporary 2-year piece to it. We've been able to get a lot of a lot of projects done in the last year-ish. We're right at a year, I believe, October.
off the plate and moving. The number of projects we have continues to grow. And I think we've made some good progress with having these positions on board. I know that the civil engineer in particular has been a big benefit to the engineering department and the capital projects arena as far as getting our grants through and our projects continue to move. Are there questions about these two positions? Are there concerns about removing the temporary piece to them? With that, that's all the FTE requests we have for 2025. Again, we don't ask for FTEs lightly. We know that that's something that, again, as I said, not permanent. It is an ongoing expense. It becomes operating. And so we don't ever want to add a position just to lay it off within a year to come back and say, oh, we actually we can't do this. So we're very cautious to add positions.
So where are the other 20 full-time requests? Because you have 25.
I know. When I was writing that, I was like, I should put 2025, but I had 25 on the other slide. So I
Oh,
went with it.
So
I
that's
kept
just,
my theme.
it's just a 5 then. that we're
It's just the fine print.
Got it.
Yeah, no, that would be a big budget year, 25 positions.
Is
No.
the,
Yeah, see if we can sneak that by them.
yeah, I saw that too, and I'm like, there's no way we're adding that many people.
No. No.
Is the police overhire still in there?
Yes, we still have budgeted in technically, I believe, 3 overhires. However, the 2 that were added. How many years was that? 2 years ago? 2 years ago?
Ish.
Yes.
So
We have
I'm-
them fully funded as positions. So if we hire them January 1, we're fully funded for those positions.
So what do we, I'm gonna break this down simply. I want a yes or no. Will there be 2 police overhire positions still available?
In January?
January 1? Because the whole purpose of the overhire was to keep us recruiting. So everything I'm seeing when we get our weekly reports is that we only have 1 position left to hire. So that means if that position gets filled and there's people in the process, correct?
Is,
Right now. So
Mhm.
if that position gets filled, then we are not working on overhiring at all, right?
Go ahead.
is that last position?
Well, in talking with HR even today, you have to anticipate retirements or people that you think might be leaving, and we are anticipating at least 1 that I know of. So it's probably something we're gonna move forward with an overhire once we actually get fully funded at minimum.
But that's not why we put it in.
So
The
well,
re-
let's back up. Let's make sure I understand this. So you're saying we have 1 more to fill. Does that include the 3 overhires or is that just the base level before the overhires? So the 3 overhires are already part of that number. So if we got that next one, we would already have the 3 overhires on staff. So
But we put those in 3 years ago. So because we're not keeping up with
But
where
that-
we should be.
But that's what, I mean, that's the intent then. You have 3 more than originally. It's not like you just don't keep adding 3 every time it was filled.
If you do that, then your budget would just continue to increase. So we,
Increase
on
every
the
time.
budget side, what you're talking, the way I budget for is I have so many positions that are authorized that I put in my budget for dollar amounts. So then we're appropriated. If what you're wanting to do is continue the recruitment process, then we can do that. But that piece of it, depending upon when those positions are hired, may or may not have a budget impact. And at what point, if you continue to add the 2, do you stop? Or do
You
you
won't.
not stop?
You won't,
Well, then you just
Because-
be adding 2 full-time positions every time you hire. someone.
but you have to have that position to be able to recruit.
Yeah, that's what the 3
And we
are.
don't have it. It will go away. Because they will be hired fully, and so there's no recruiting unless somebody retires.
Okay, we have
Well,
25 officers, we have 3 overhires, but I'm just using 25 as an example. We authorized 3 overhires. We're now at 28 officers.
But when we authorize that, if you look at our numbers, if you look at the numbers per thousand, the whole reason we were doing that is so we can continue to hire. They would become full-time positions when they get hired. But you have to have that overhire to continue to recruit.
I don't think that's.
Yeah, I think overhire is really meant, is a term meant for recruiting. Like we will have 20 positions that were appropriated.
For 23.
I don't know the last time we're actually fully staffed. Cause it's always hard to get to where you're fully staffed. But what we do is anticipate turnover and we anticipate retirements. And that's what we refer to as an overhire. They're still in that position, but we know they're leaving soon or within a year, and that's how long it takes someone to get on the road. So it's more of a recruiting, not so much the
And
appropriate.
that's why we put in those 3 overhires, was exactly that. But I think there's a disconnect on when does that overhiring recruiting stop? It stops once you have X number of FTEs plus those 3 overhires, you're now full. You
It should
don't-
never stop.
Well, but that's not what we voted on. Otherwise, you
Well,
would
We-
always
we-
be adding an
We-
FTE to the
We
budget.
did. And that's the reason is because
Well,
this,
then we didn't need to add 3 overhires. We needed to add 3 continually added FTEs every year.
but you
It's a
didn't.
Totally different vote.
Which we can do it that way. The reason we did the overhires is because it would have, like, I'll give you an example.
but that's
We've
what we
got,
just
we
did.
got one on a retire, that's gonna retire. We got one that's in the military.
Understand all that.
None of those have been replaced.
I'm the way I'm seeing it is that we'd have 3 overhires, right? And then when this person down here retires, they fill the position and then we fill that back up at the top?
Once they're
Like,
hired
That's what we're
in,
doing now.
once they're
Is that
hired
what
in, they're still here.
Yeah, and then I mean, that's. what I
You're
thought.
not adding on to the total number of
It's
police
just to make
plus the
sure that
overhire.
there's not gappage in coverage.
Well,
Make sure
then
this-
we need to look at, then you guys need to look at what we're getting for coverage. If
Well,
you
that's
look at our per thousand, that's the reason we had the overhire, so we could continue to recruit consistently. Because we knew, because I'll give you an example, if we're not out recruiting, we could have, there's at least 4 to 5 officers that could retire tomorrow. Get pissed off and say, well, I'm done.
I don't
You
think
won't
anybody-
you won't get those in the next 3 years.
And I don't think anybody's arguing that, but it's a different decision of adding total FTEs versus having overhires that continually renew and add on to FTEs without.
But that's the whole purpose is when you get hired in, you're no longer an overhire. The overhire was 100% for recruitment,
Yeah.
When
and
you
they're
get
now
hired-
full.
but we're full right now. And if you don't have the overhire, so we can go out and recruit, we can go right back to where we were, where we're 3 officers down, 4 officers down. We're already 1 officer down that we haven't recruited for because he's in the military. Well, I know, but he's not here working for us. So that's an officer out. You got 4 to 5 that can retire at any point in time. And we're at 3 per day. So you're at almost minimum staffing levels. And if you look at the numbers per 1,000, we're not even close. And if you look at the numbers of what's going on, I mean, you can't say, look at all the court cases that are up, but we don't need more police officers.
Nobody's arguing that.
And so
I've not
that's
heard
why
that
that
argument
overhire,
before.
because what'll happen is the minute it's full in January, we'll sit here and wait until people retire before we start recruiting.
What about adding recruitment positions? Or we're actively recruiting?
That's what the
people?
overhire was. You have to
But
have
no,
a
it's
position.
not. It's to just fill in when people leave.
I would say we're still operating with at least 1 overhire right now, but I think what you're maybe referring to is additional police officers. That's
It's
what
for
and that's,
recruiting only. It's so we can always be recruiting. Because we have never, in the history of me being on this council and dealing with police, we have never been fully staffed once.
right, we're about to.
No, we're not.
We're 1,
Because you're counting an officer that's in the military as fully staffed, which on paper, it looks like we're fully staffed. We're not fully staffed.
Well,
Right.
I thought the answer to the question that I asked was, we have the 3 fully hires, we're 1 away from having the 3 overhires. So by that math, we would be fully staffed with our FTE, plus we have 2 overhires on staff. So-
right, if nobody leaves, coming
that's
up,
what-
this,
yeah.
this one, we're really
So we
close to,
have
we'll
3
be fully
people on
staffed.
the bench waiting to fill those FTE. If we don't have a discussion about how many FTE are appropriate, that's fine. That's a different discussion. Overhire, meaning we have 3 people on the bench ready to step in for those previously approved FTEs. That's
And-
what we have
but
now.
they're
And
already
2 of them are full and 1 of them may be.
But
full.
they're not an overhire. The minute we hired them, they're not an overhire. The minute we hired them, they became an employee.
Well, then you're gonna have a.
So the
That's
reason
a-
to be able to recruit is you have to have a position to recruit.
I 100% disagree. That's what we voted on.
Maybe we just add recruiting positions where we're actively recruiting.
So
That's an overhire. That's what it is.
So
Well,
our-
maybe
our-
recruitment.
our police, full-time FTE not including overhires, is 28, right? Is that correct? And then, so 28 permanent FTE position.
So you're
then-
saying we're at 31.
So,
No,
so
they just
then
goes
plus the
from 30.
3 overhires. Is that what I'm understanding?
No, that includes it.
Oh, okay, so then they shouldn't be classified then as overhires. We should have, council should have a minimum staffing level of full-time permanent FTE.
Yeah.
That's at whatever that is, 28, 29, right? And then we authorize
That's what
3
we-
overhires
but that's-
above and beyond that.
That's what we did.
Right, and we made it now. Three overhead.
Right.
What-
When you
whatever the
include the
number
chief and lieutenants, it's the
Well,
28.
But it doesn't sound, just based upon what you just said, it doesn't sound more like we're there.
No.
Yeah, we are. We have two of the overhires. Yes.
Not full-time permanent FTE. Because you're counting the overhires. You can't count the overhires as a permanent full-time FTE.
I don't get it.
Why wouldn't you? They're on staff.
They,
working.
they
No,
were.
No,
I
they're
agree,
not.
I agree with what Shane
They're
said.
not, they're not on staff.
They
The
are.
overhires are not
They're-
on staff working?
They're, aren't they
are.
full-time employees?
Okay.
I think we haven't had this
What you're
conversation.
Talking about.
There's
Really
two-
have
there's
no
two,
idea
there's
what
two
you're
of them. There's one tonight that just came in. He's
I
not working.
understand that.
There's another one that's not working.
Well, yeah, but that adds to the total.
So then maybe we just need to, if council, if this is council's appetite, we just need to approve. more.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a different. no,
The
it's-
the difference, the reason we put
If
this
that's
in,
what we want to do.
the reason we put it in was for recruitment.
This is understood, Shane.
Because they being the city would say, you only authorize
Okay,
25,
so
we're at
let's,
25.
here's my problem with what you're talking about. So right now, we're at 25.
Mhm.
3 overhires. We're actually at 27 because 2 of the overhires are hired. We hire another one, nobody leaves. This is assuming nobody leaves. So now we're at 28. We
Yes.
keep recruiting. We find 2 more, we hire them. Now we're at 30. They get filled. Oh, we need 2 more overhires. So at some point, your budget. Now, if that's what we want to do, that's fine, but we need to approve those FTEs. We can't tell the city that you get 25 FTEs plus 3 overhires. They can't just add 29 and 30.
Yeah,
No, they can't.
Yeah,
why?
It's budgetary.
We just gave it in the overhire.
No, we didn't.
that's a three.
I get, were the overhires budgeted in?
That's
They were
full-
Okay,
budgeted in.
so how did you get from 28 to 31?
You
So
got 3
the,
more.
the budgeted overhires are already in the budget.
It is, it's-
All right, go with it. You guys will see when we're sitting here, when you have 5 of them leave and you can't get officers, you'll see what it's like when you're
That's a
sitting here.
different, that's a different discussion. than what
But you're
saying.
not recruiting them. You
But-
cannot recruit.
But Shane, then go for 5 overhires, but you can't say, just keep adding in overhires. That's perpetual motion machine that will never end potentially.
It will, because you can pull it back when you get to where you need to be, but we're not
But you're-
there. That
Can-
should be between chief and.
Can we
and-
hear the chief? Can get his, see
Well,
what he has to
this is
say?
different than the number. Those are 2 different discussions. And I think
It's,
Let me mic up here. What I believe we are having a discrepancy on is the overhires of 3. We're about ready to fill the 3rd one. What actual FTE level we should have to be well-staffed for the police force is a different conversation than what the budget should be for the overhires. That's different. If we decided, hey, we should have 28 full-time employees on the police force and still have 3 overhires, then we would be talking about budgeting for the 3 overhires plus 28. Right now, we're talking about 25 plus the 3, which is where we're at currently. Or about to be. There's 2 different discussions that are going on here, and I think we're just mixing wires, but I don't necessarily know what we should be at. I would lean to my professionals on that, but I do know if we're hitting that 3 overhires, then we've achieved our budgetary goal. Right?
I get
Because
the-
otherwise-
from a budget standpoint, yes.
And that's
From
what
a
I'm-
recruitment standpoint, absolutely.
Again, that's where I think we're different
And you
here.
can't continue to recruit them.
Understood.
And that's this is not like, hey, let's go get a public works person to help mow lawns. Maybe a year. You could get them through and find out they flush out, and we have to start over.
Are we going to be having a discussion in the future on what the actual FTE level should be for the police force to be fully staffed?
Um,
Yeah, yes, we should That is a different conversation, though. I would
Yes.
agree with you. And I think the reason there might be some confusion, like Shane said, you've been here, what, 13 years? How many times were we fully staffed? So when we talk about overhire, we're continually recruiting because we've never been fully staffed. So once you become fully staffed at that point, you cheer and you're happy and all of that, but at the same time, I would say we're always looking at the workforce with officers. Today, I just had this conversation with HR is we're pretty sure we know of someone who's going to retire. And when you consider those aspects, and that's where you start applying the overhire. And if it were, hey, we'd come to council, say next month and say, we just found out we've got 10 officers that are going to retire. We would be coming to you and start talking about the overhire.
And increasing that.
But we're too late.
What's that?
We're too late then.
Right. So today's
That's-
conversation was anticipating, they're in a retirement program that allows them to retire at full at 53 if they have so many years. And so you start, whether you have a conversation with the officer or not, you anticipate that we could have a turnover. And that's where we start to apply
But
the
it's
overhire.
more than just a retirement or a person, because we know what it's like out there right now. They're getting bonuses, they'll leave. They'll leave. I mean, we had the officer of the year leave.
Right.
So, I
it
mean,
takes a
it
year.
can be like that, and suddenly we got 2 or 3, and then you're down and you haven't been recruited for any.
Nobody's arguing that, and it obviously worked because, I mean, we have overhires. So, I mean, and we were recruiting and we're finally at the spot where we might not, and let's have that discussion. But I think the definition of overhires is continue recruiting no matter how many you have on staff and potentially hiring. That's right. That's where we're.
I think until we get to the level we need to be at. And that's the problem. We are right now, where we're sitting right now, where we were in 2014. Right now for officers. When
Again,
Mike Molzon passed away, we were in this same
Again.
spot.
different discussion.
And you can't tell me that we don't. And that's the issue.
where I think that's.
It's 100% different discussion.
Which this is the perfect time for it, because I mean, we're in the middle of budget. So from an appropriation standpoint, we've talked about worst case scenario, but what about best case scenario? Say we do get fully staffed and we're recruiting, we're doing the overhires, we get people, they hire on because they're competing or we're competing with other agencies, they have 5 offers on the table. We have to hire them on to then start paying them and working. But at that point, if I'm fully staffed and I've now hired that overhire, where's that budget coming from? Because then now I'm coming out with another overhire and say that one then applies. Like say I have 5 in the queue and I've hired them, but now at some point we do need a minimum staffing. And then the overhires on top of that to be in the budget. That way, if we do get good candidates, we can hire them on and beat out other agencies and get them working. But this is a great time to talk about minimum staffing. I believe Chief has done
Done
some
the
work.
He has.
work on this. So I don't know if he's ready to discuss it now or if he wants to wait until next time, but putting him on the spot.
I can pull up the email. One of the things that I had asked was give me some time to get my feet underneath me to see where we're at, and pull up, the numbers. And then look at, there was no way I wanted to come here and tell you my thoughts of staffing up or down without knowing what our people were doing every day. But I pulled some, data and started to put a report together, and I sent it to the city manager. There's 2 different discussions. So one is, like you said, the overhire. So this one, we're talking about where we think we need to be as far as officers. I can tell you that what I found that would put us still below what the Washington state level is to add 4 police officers. That would give you, we have 4 patrol squads. That would put 1 extra officer on each squad. I also think by doing that, it would save on overtime because as Councilman Bowman had said, minimum staffing is 2. So if I have we have 2 squads currently working right now that has a sergeant, 2 bodies on it. If anybody takes a vacation day, a sick day, training, got to call someone in. And so our overtime goes absolutely bananas over that. So that's an additional issue that we have, but I'm pulling up my report now. What I did was compared, I had met with Chris and she said, make sure you're using the right comparisons. So I only pulled Washington cities because Washington is last in the US as far as officers per 1,000. I also only used cities that were somewhere in our genre. So my measurements were from 13,500 to 25,000. And looking at the projected where we're at. I also based it, look at the last 12 years. In the last 12 years, our city has grown, I believe, I'm trying to pull up the report. Our city has grown 25.6%. From 2012 to 2024, the PD has grown by one officer at 3.7%. Battleground has 1.25 officers per 1,000 residents. The Washington state average is 1.3 officers per 1,000 residents. If we added, we have a total of 28 sworn. That includes myself and the 2 lieutenants, which they're sworn. I haven't taken a call for service yet. If we added the 4 officers, that would only take us to 1.42 per 1,000 officers, just staffing up those 4 squads. If you look at the national average of cities our size, it's 1.88 officers. And then another thing that the city manager said, make sure that you're looking at everything. I will tell you that because of COVID, you saw a drop in calls for service that occurred for several years. But when you have added in the self-initiated activities, with that projection, we are up 92.5% from what the police staffing was before. So, but it comes at a substantial cost. When Chris and I met, had to have a reality check of this is a lot of money that we're talking about. And we recently talked about plans of what we could do outside funding to try to increase these numbers. But the one concern that we did talk about is it does take a year trying to recruit. So if we want to do something right now, I'm 12 months out. And the number that I used as the projection for where we're at is for my comparisons is 22,470 is the number that I used. And I think that we're above that number when I used that number, but I can send the report to the city manager and she can share it with you. But I think we're trying to be very, very diligent of where we're at. I can tell you that on the comparisons at where we're at right now, we're on the very lowest. By adding those 4, it puts us somewhere in the middle. But then we put a goal of trying to add because one of the problems that we have with a smaller size agency, the military officer that they talked about, the long-term FMLA. I've got 1 in the academy because that includes that 28, includes 1 in the academy, 2 in field training. So that just took if you take the command people out, took it from 25 down to 20 of actual cops that are out there on the road. And I want to make sure that we can continue to deliver the services that we've been asking the officers to do, while being cognizant that the overtime rate goes up, and so does that has an impact on their mental health. I've had people that the money's great, but they said I'd rather spend some time at home with my family. So we're trying to figure that in there, but also very cognizant of what Megan said of where are we at with money wise, and how do you have the money tree that is going to pay for this? Because it is expensive.
Well, we've talked about some funding options for that, and there are some funding options. I know last year we talked about the public service sales tax at 0.1 that if we get 85% of. If the county, which has talked about taking it, we would only get 40% of. So there's some tools out there, and I think that comes out to about 500,000 a year-ish,
About 595, you were very
Which would-
close.
which would be a reoccurring revenue source to pay for those, for additional officers.
But Chief, if I'm hearing you correct, you're suggesting, we're not you suggesting, but what the information you gave us is 4 permanent officers taking us to 32 minimum full-time permanent staff in office.
At 32, that would put us at 1.47 officers per 1,000. With a plan, projected growth of where we should go. I think that we at the PD have failed you in that not projecting out what growth and what that'll look like. When I build this in, it needs to look at everything. For
Well,
every 2 cops, you gotta have a car. These are all real costs that have to be disclosed so that everybody knows what it is that we're talking about. But yes, with a net increase of the 1 that we had, it didn't move the needle very much.
well, and I think how you solve the confusion we just had is if your proposal is after adding the 4 to add 2 every year after annually until, or whatever it may be, then you go 4 FTE next years with 2 overhires, and then the next year, those 2 overhires become FTE, and then you still have 2 overhires.
Mhm.
So then you roll that in. That's not what we funded. Maybe we should have. That was not the argument, but I mean, I think that's how you roll that in. And then Megan's coming every year saying, okay, you're gonna have 2 more FTE for police if this is the plan you want to follow. And I think that's how we need to set that up. That's what we want to do.
Especially if I've understood Megan correctly, because these are unfunded liabilities, that they're not funded. Where would the money come from?
We
So
don't have to budget.
hopefully we could look at the salary savings when you have somebody that's off for military. But it would certainly put us in a position that at least we can have that until we do know one's already said, I am going to retire. So we know that one exists, and hopefully that we can keep a pulse on the agency to understand, all right, we can project this is coming. And that gives me the opportunity to meet with my boss and say, can we go ahead and look to increase this and have that oversight?
Well,
Megan, maybe given us this information before, but can we move forward with a public safety bill
Mhm.
tax initiative of, what is it, 0.2?
0.1.
Wait, 1.
0.1 is the max?
Mhm.
And is that
Is-
sunset or is that into perpetuity?
I believe it's perpetuity.
Yeah.
It does,
And that's a voter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I would encourage us to give that serious consideration. If we communicate with the voters, just like we did with the fire annexation, right? And we say, this is gonna be dedicated for this is our plan. I think we would get strong support from that.
And would that, like, if we did something like that, let's say we authorized 32 positions, would it be considered supplanting if we did
No.
we can use that for anything in the public safety, right? Not-
correct. It doesn't have to be, the supplanting rule doesn't apply.
Yeah.
So just to give you some quick numbers, based upon 4 additional officers, it'd be about 950,000 to $1 million to add the 4 officers. So just some perspective of
Is
what
that-
these positions cost.
Is
So a
that
fully
just
loaded
that-
officer, including benefits as well as everything they get, is about 175,000. And then when you add the 2 vehicles, you add training, you add outfitting them. Again, rough estimate, back of the napkin over here.
Thank you.
Another thought to have too, I know the public safety tax is one thought, but also the TBD sales tax, taking that to the voter would free up some other general fund dollars to be able to help fund police. So there's a couple different opportunities. They're both voter requests that could potentially help fund the PD.
I would be in support of, if we're going to do something to the voters, that if it's public safety, then it's public safety and not put TBD And although it's all fungible and if we want to put more towards roads, then maybe we look at that at point two, if council wants to, but I would be hesitant to do it for police.
I think your odds are significantly higher at having a very clear message. This is why we need it. This is what it's gonna do.
Yeah, and maybe that's, I mean, if that's a discussion that staff is and council wants to have, we can have a study session on that. And what that proposal may be a more formal reading of chief's proposal.
But I think we also have to look at, for this year, what are we gonna do? Because if we go out and run a levy to fund this, we're talking about next year sometime. And so we could be talking another year and a half down the line. And we didn't get 3 hired. So how are you gonna hire 6? So how are we gonna catch up with this? I think we need to look at other options. I don't know what those are, but I think we need to be looking at.
And we got about 6 minutes till 7 o'clock. Did you have something, Victoria? I think it's a great discussion to have and we can, if we have time, I know we just kind of usurped the rest of the budgetary.
The biggest piece of what we have for this next year is the FTE requests as well as capital projects. Everything else is minor in comparison or more status quo service levels that we already do. So it's actually a good conversation to have with the council.
So we can sit down and maybe schedule something, the city manager and I, as far as when to bring this forward.
Yeah, I would suggest with the public, excuse me, safety tax. Statute allows up to 3 1/10. The county's already implemented 1. Cities can only buy for 1/10. If the county were to come and do 2 more, we would be out of luck. Because you can only have a cap of 3/10. They did discuss this last year. You can only hold it on a primary or general election as well. It is a sales tax, simple majority. 1/3 has to be used for criminal justice purposes, and the other 2/3 can actually be used for any lawful purpose in the general fund. But we should probably have a workshop sooner than later if this is a strategy we want to add 3-4 additional
We have-
positions to the budget. I personally would be uncomfortable adding those positions in the budget if we didn't have another revenue funding strategy to go out behind it, but there is options.
Is this something council wants to hear more? Okay, I'm seeing heads. Yeah. So let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll be back at 7. Thank you. We're seven. Like to call this Battleground City Council regular meeting, October 7th, 2024 to order. If you're able, please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag
United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor McCoy,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Bowman, Councilmember Farrar,
Present.
Councilmember DeRocher,
Here.
Councilmember Cortez, Councilmember Davis.
Here.
And Councilmember Overholser,
Here.
and the city clerk is present and roll has been called.
Thank you. Next up is agenda approval. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Move to approve the meeting agenda as presented.
Seconds by Councilmember Cortez. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. That brings us to summary reports and presentations. Looks like we have DCWA, Deputy Mayor Bowman.
Yeah, we're just going through our budget right now. Some things have kind of moved around and we're working on finishing stuff up for the growth management for next year. So that's about it right now.
There is one other council member report. I attended RTC. That's starting to heat up a little bit. The environmental impact statement for the bridge was released. If anybody has any questions or wants to meet with Greg, I'm blanking on his last name, but he's more than welcome. RTC will be voting on the environmental impact statement, and it's open right now for public comments. So if there's questions you have, I have some of the handouts. I'm happy to meet individually or set up a meeting with the bridge administrator. So again, we're just voting on the environmental impact statement. Any other council member reports this evening? All right, hearing none, I'll take us into presentations. City manager, introduce those.
Thank you, Mayor. Boy, we have. There he is. Chief Sorensen is going to do a presentation on the 2023 annual report for Fire District 3.
Good evening, council. Thanks for having us. We really appreciate the opportunity to work with the city. It's been a great partnership. I think it's been good for both of us. We continue to develop our services and work with the community closely. And this report kind of covers some of the major topics for the year. Now we're almost through 24, but this points out some things that are still relevant now. And if you have questions, please just let me know and I'll kind of go through what we're trying to accomplish here. This report is actually something that we're required to do through RCW to capture the events that go on within our junior taxing district. And the contents kind of lay it out. You got a message from the chief, got information about the fire district, service area, responses, and then reports of each of the divisions that we have, and some changes in personnel, and then looking forward. In this message, and I apologize, this really isn't set up for good viewing, but this report is available on our website. If someone out in the audience would like to look closer, I'll point out some primary issues here. So if you read this report, you will see that we were working hard on our levy at the time that we published this. It was still a work in progress. And what we point out here is that our funding is primarily, in fact, mostly solely from fire levy. We don't have any other sources of revenue other than grant funding. And that is sometimes hard to get. It also funds our EMS program. We do not have an EMS levy in Fire District 3, so we run 70% medical. Because of some specifics within our district that we're working on, we do not currently have an EMS levy, unlike our neighbors, a lot of our neighbors. So in August, we ran that levy again, second time. We ran it in 23 and failed. In August this year, we passed 34-cent increase, went up to $1.50, and it passed at 65.5%. So with that, what we will do is increase our staffing, and you'll see why here pretty soon. Add paramedics, purchase a new ambulance. There's some EMS issues going on now, and we want to be transport ready, just for backup purposes, and then do some facility improvements. So a little bit about Fire District 3. It was established in 1947 by local community members. And we remember that to this day because we really try to hold those values true, and that this is a community fire department and we are here for them. We serve them, and that's who we report to. Well, it's changed a lot over the years. We now serve 46,000 people in 92 square miles. It includes, you probably know this, but it includes the city of Battleground, Hawkinson, Brush Prairie, Vennersburg, Rawson Road, Hyacinth, the Battleground Lake area, and Lush Falls. We have 3 elected board members. Currently, we have 57 on staff. That includes administration and line personnel. 45 firefighters on the line, 3 battalion chiefs, roughly 10 intern volunteers who are studying to become firefighters. We run 3 shifts, A, B, and C. And we staff 4 stations. 4 out of 5 stations are currently staffed. Any questions so far? So our statements are key, and if you look through these, they're similar to many others, but there's some things that we hold near, and that is our people, both internally and externally, our teamwork, our integrity, the community, like I mentioned, managing public funds, the stewardship piece, and then professionalism. And the vision is to be the best fire district in America. Well, if you know vision statements, it's something that's hard to measure, hard to ever reach, but that's our goal. So that's the bar. We all kind of thought it was goofy at the time, but it still holds true today. The organization itself, and I apologize again to the audience, but this roughly shows how we're structured. You got the commissioners who I report to, and then this at the time was 2 division chiefs. Now Chris Drone is an assistant chief and fire marshal. We've got 1 administrative officer, 1 administrative assistant, 3 training captains, cadet, EMS, and fire training. We have a fire inspector who works in the city, Dawson. And then down below, it shows the line structure with the BCs, and then 15 firefighter paramedics per shift. Minimum staffing is 10 per day throughout the area. And just a note on number of firefighters. Well, stand by on that. We'll get to that here. Here's the area and where the locations are roughly. So 35 is the city station here. 31 is in Hawkinson. That's our main office. 34 is up on Rawson Road towards Larch Mountain. 32 is Vennersburg. 33 is Battleground Lake, covering Hyacinth and East Fork. You can see the number of calls there in those areas. You can see with the density in the city, we have a high volume of calls in the city. And I'll kind of talk about that in a minute, but so in the city, it's a density issue where we have a lot of back-to-back calls, a lot of medical calls. In the county district area, it's a distance problem. So we're running 5-mile distances. So it's kind of challenging that way. We got kind of a couple response issues there. That is why we staff these stations and are working hard to get them all staffed. So a minute ago, we talked about law enforcement officers, company staffing for fire. Currently for us, it's 2. That's our minimum. Now, we do at times have more than that, but our budget only allows us to ensure that we have 2 per company. We have 5 companies per day. That's where you get the 10, and the battalion chief is number 11. The regional standard, most departments, career departments in Clark County are 3. National standard is 4. So with this lid lift, if you heard what we were talking about, that was one of the things that we were working to get to, is 3 per company. It will take a while. In fact, depending on how the revenues go and how they change, we may not get there to 3 for each company in the 6-year levy, but we will get all stations staffed at a minimum of 2. So I anticipate 34 will have 2. That's one of the first things we want to do. We want to get 3 on the truck here in the city, and then 3 at 31, and it's just going to take time to get there. As far as number of firefighters per 1,000, we've got 46,000 people and 45 line firefighters. It's about 1. With this levy, we'll get close to 1.3, which is about the national average. But it'll take time. And then at the end of that 6 years, we have to do it again. So that's the business. That's living in Washington. Because we're limited to that 6%. Once we hit the end of the levy, we'll go right back to 1%. It's hard to keep up that way. Okay, on responses, we've averaged an increase of 4.3% over 7 years, which is how long we've been in the city. We started in 16. There was a request for proposal in 15. And we submitted a proposal and were chosen. And we came in and staffed 2 units during the day in the city. And then eventually got to 2 all day in the city, which really helped us cover this better. We don't have as much mutual aid as used to be. So there's a continual growth, and that won't stop. The stations are placed well, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but you know, like I said, there's a distance problem and there's a density problem. As Brush Prairie area fills in, we have property there to build another station, but we got to wait for that infill to see when the time's right there. So last year, 23, we had 5,175 calls. 3,600 of those were emergency calls. You can see the breakdown. Rescue and EMS, of course, is the largest call type. Good intent, those are mostly non-emergent. Those are various problems that we're called for to help out. And then you can see the fires and all the other service types, hazardous conditions. This particular slide is very busy, but it's very important. This is called our standard of cover, which is a expectation. What we do is we look at how long it takes to get to 90% of the calls. And you can see that for example, Fire District 3 BLS, 62% of the time we get there within our 6-minute target. But our average response time is 5:49, which is good. But we don't look at averages, we look at the 90 percentile. So ALS, 91%, which is good. That's with an 8-minute target. And an average response time of 5:56. If you're curious, AMR gets there 40% of the time at 8 minutes. And then for structures, same thing. 59% of the time, the first unit arrives within 6 minutes. And then for Average first unit is 606. Usually the unit arrives less than that, less 559, or was it 5?
Can I ask you a question?
Yep.
Okay, so is this district wide?
Yes, this is
So-
district wide.
What is do you know the response time within the city limits?
Yep, for structure fire, it's 435.
Is that in here?
And, pardon me?
Is it in here and I missed it or?
No, we don't have it in here. This is a district wide report.
Okay, and
For
then
EMS, it's 541,
541, okay.
and all call types, it's 545.
540.
And the one thing that's impressive here, especially in the city, the first alarm response is 651, meaning we've got all the units that we want for the first alarm there. That's actually very good. Benefit here in the city is that we have stations surrounding the city. And so that's one of the things it's not as good in the county area because of that distance
Mhm.
issue I talked about.
Thank you.
So the district-wide for full alarm assignment is 26% of the calls. But the average for full alarm assignment in county area of the district is 9 minutes, 38 seconds, which is still decent. One thing that we're not good at currently is the number of firefighters we put on the scene, but like I said before, that's our target. We're working on that. So we do a lot with less, and we have for a very long time. Training, of course, is a big deal. We use standards in Washington Administrative Code, the Washington Surveying Rating Bureau, International Fire Service Accreditation Congress, National Fire Protection Association. And then EMS wise, most of our requirements come from the Department of Health and the medical program director here in Clark County. Combined training hours in 23 was 10,845, which is 217 per firefighter. Training, I'm sure that you all know training's challenging because there's changes going on continuously. It takes a lot to keep up. So we're training all the time. We do, 90% of what we do is prep and train. EMS, we have, when we came to the city, one of the requirements or one of the things we proposed actually was a medic in the city at all times, which we've done that. Currently, we have a medic in the city area and the county area of the district all the time. It's varied a little bit over time with people coming and going. The county has worked on, one thing that I want to point out before that though, is the type of units that we use. We try to use units that are more agile and quicker to respond and get around. That's been very effective. So we use, the 1-ton type, what looks like a brush unit. We use those 90% of the time, and those help a lot. Now in the city, depending on what the call type is, sometimes we end up in another unit. So occasionally you'll see the truck going down the road to medical call, but that's just because that's the time the call came in and it was on something else. Other things going on with EMS is nurse navigation, which you probably heard about. That is a triage system to decipher which units actually need emergency services. The CARES program, which we just started our first CARES medic October 1st. And then we also are working on the grant that the city obtained, social worker position. We do interview 2 on Thursday. So those are the things that support this and relieve units from being tied up on incidents that otherwise are not emergencies, but need us. And of course, we have the whole AMR contract transport issue. We're working together with our EMS District 2 partners. Eric's on that, and Fire District 6 and Clark Palace, looking for options for the future. Risk reduction, this is a big deal. And I mentioned that, we really value community connection. And this is one way that we've really kind of achieved that through working with schools, open houses, a lot of involvement. In the city, we have the fire marshal's services. And we have a fire inspector who, this is Dawson, and he does inspections. We do fire education programs, fire investigations, and new construction services on permitting. And to look at some results here, in 2023, we had plans reviews conducted, 138, 377 businesses inspected, 15 fire investigations, 146 public education events, which include open houses, training, tours, fire center program. We also do wildland interface home inspections to assist people with preparing for wildland fire. Logistics, like I said, we have 5 stations. We have most stations are in good shape. We have one station that needs a little bit of upgrade, like heating, cooling, to staff it on Rawson Road 34. Station 35 is the one that really needs the attention. We're working on that with the city. That's in the works. As far as apparatus go, we're in pretty good shape. We are preparing the bid for the purchase for the ambulance that we discussed in the lid lift, and should be getting that ordered. However, it's going to take about 16 to 18 months to get it. Engines take a couple years. Fire engines up to $1 million now. 2 years ago, we bought 2 for $630 each. So we are facing a lot of challenges when it comes to funding capital. Changes in our staffing. We've had retirements, and, up until this year, we haven't hired. But we've had an assistant chief retire. We did hire actually one firefighter in 23 to replace one that left. We promoted Jason Mansfield to division chief, and then we promoted a battalion chief and 2 training captains. We just hired 2 firefighters to replace the 2 that had left for other agencies, and we did not hire until we knew we had the funding to do it. And then we've notified 5 more that are starting in 25 based on the successful levy effort to increase our staffing. Looking ahead, our focus really is what we have committed to the public. We've always had a history of keeping our promises. We're good at that. And we usually over deliver, under promise, and I anticipate that's what we'll do from here on out. And face the challenges ahead. Again, thank you for having us. Thank you for your partnership. It's been good. Since we annexed, we don't see each other as often. I kind of like it because I got one boss now. It's good for me, but we still are here all the time. So if you need anything from us, please call.
I think we got a few questions. Sure.
Oh.
Handlebars.
November. It's not November yet, but they do it in November. Some departments, it's a tradition. Well, not all of them.
Jealousy doesn't look good on you. I'm just.
I can't do it, so. I don't know. It's one of those things. Well, yeah, I guess.
I can speak to your inspections, and as a business owner in this city, I'd never actually had an inspection until Fire District 3 took over. So appreciate the help and keeping the employees safe and the city safe. So
yeah,
the work ethic and the proactive nature and the partnership is
it's tough sometimes. We're like the auditor. We're here to help.
Yeah.
And then charge you for
I got a clean bill of health last time, so I'm good, but appreciate the partnership.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, thank you.
I think we have one more chief up, yeah?
I think Chief, you're up next to introduce.
Hey,
A new-
Oh, this will
new
be,
oath of office.
this will be wonderful. Liz, are you going to administer the oath? All right, I'd like to introduce Ray, if you'll come up, Officer Ray Figuration. Ray is a great find for us. Ray had worked in the correctional facility at Larch Correctional Facility for Washington State Department of Corrections. We took him from Vancouver Police Department. He comes to us with a degree from the Eastern Washington University. Joining Ray here today is his family and his fiance. He plans on getting married. Sona, do you mind standing up? There's his beautiful soon-to-be bride. They'll be married in about 10 months. No kids, but they do have a little puppy named Morocco. Also here tonight is Ray's parents, Jackie and Ronnie. Ray's brother, John, and Ray's grandparents, Shirley and Alfred Flores. He's been out here for just over 20 years. He likes to hunt, bowl, and spend time with friends and family. His fun fact is he's been to the Philippines twice. So we're very, very grateful to have Officer Figuration with us. And so without any further ado, ma'am.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Raymond Figuration,
Do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support,
that I will support,
obey,
obey,
and defend the Constitution
and defend the Constitution
and laws of the United States of America
and laws of the United States of America
and of the state of Washington.
and of the state of Washington.
I will abide by
I will abide by
the Law Enforcement Code of Ethics
the Law Enforcement Code of Ethics
and will diligently and impartially
and will diligently and impartially
perform all duties of police officer
perform all duties of police officer
for the city of Battle Ground,
for the city of Battle Ground,
county of Clark,
county of Clark,
state of Washington,
state of Washington,
as such duties are prescribed by law.
as such duties as prescribed by law. Yeah, thank you.
I did. All right, very cool. Happy to have you, sir. Stay safe out there. Next up, we have citizens communications. I believe that's the end of our presentations. Is that correct? Okay. We do have two citizens communications, so I'll open the meeting now for citizens communications. You're limited to 3 minutes. It's an opportunity to hear from members of the public in a limited public forum. Please refrain from derogatory remarks, personal attacks, campaign speeches, and applause. All the city council desires to allow public comment. The city's business must proceed in an orderly, timely manner. Please direct your comments to the mayor. Council may not be able to respond to individual comments and may refer citizens to a staff member for assistance. If you have handouts, please hand them to the city clerk directly to the right of the podium. And thank you for your understanding in that. And we'll start out. First, we have Wynn from Vancouver. The floor is yours. And the timer should be up on the screen.
I came here tonight because I want you to cease and desist on putting poison in the drinking water. And you should invite the EPA down here to explain what sodium fluoride is when you purchase this stuff from China. This video here, 2017 Banded documentary, tells the truth about water exposed. This has the dentist, David Kennedy. I met him in person, and this is about it's about San Diego, California, but they did not want it in the water, and they pulled this garbage and they ended up having to put it in anyway. But now that they know that this stuff is poison, and when you're recycling toilet to tap between all the medicines that go down the drain and the people that are already on fluoride drugs, it's really terrible that this is even happening because you've overdosed everybody. Jackie Spear in California wrote a bill because there was a dentist, David Pollock, told her to write a bill to put the fluoride in the rest of the water. Now, where does a politician have the right to do that? They don't, right? And I would like to know in the dental registry how they can write prescriptions by telling the city council put something in the water. Find out how they write prescriptions and then have the public vote on it because he's got a white coat on. Did you know the dentists, because they used mercury fillings, they had the highest suicide rate anywhere? That was #1. And it's kind of funny to think some guy in a white coat's going to tell you to put a stuff in the water that's poison. And this is the thing that's interesting. This video is the professional perspective on water fluoridation. I put this on the Chabot Access channel when I went to college there a few years back. And they had a dental school and they all saw it, and everybody in that school knew it was poison. And later, this young girl that was cleaning my teeth, she said, were you handing those papers out in fluoride? Because I did my term paper on it. She goes, I would never put that on anybody's teeth or anything else. I know it's poison. Yes. And even the dean of the school, he says he saw it and he says, oh my God, he goes, that's pretty bad stuff. I go, that's right. Well, here's something that's very interesting. I want you all to see this. This is called Perdentix, okay? And write it down, look it up. There is an infomercial, and it's all about why the dentist put this poison in the drinking water, because it demineralizes your teeth and causes cavities. And it also demineralizes your bones and everything else, but it's a big moneymaker for the medical industry. And this thing at the end, when they tell you about fluoride and how much money they make off of us drinking poison, do check it out. And it's all written by a dentist.
All right, thank you.
And I'm putting all this stuff on public record because it's also Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and their schools are telling people to cut their breasts off. So you need to know that
All
too.
right, thank you, Wynn. Next up, we have Jessica Cole.
Hi, City Council. My name is Jessica Cole. I'm here to talk about traffic revisions. And I just want to say, I already told Mark, I'm so grateful for that new stop sign on Park Rasmussen. I took one of the Rasmussen ones and, it's a little bit busy, and I've lived too many places where, well, I've lived a lot of places, driven places. So like all the different laws in all the different states. And I didn't almost get hit, but two cars went at the same time. And I did go home and I Googled, what is the laws with stop signs? And I was right. So I was glad that the laws and at one time in my life were according to my common sense. And I just really do appreciate the different stop signs that have been put up throughout the city, by the library on Grace, the one on Scotton, over at the 7-Eleven. That intersection scares me. I don't know, cars, I feel like sometimes they stop at that line and go, I don't see anything but a fence, so there's no car. And I feel like sometimes they lurch. So I don't know what could be done but take that fence down, which I know that's not a possibility. But sometimes I do walk around the city, and like when I approach different intersections, when I have to cross, I go like, oh my gosh, this intersection's scaring a car, and now I don't even have my car to protect me. And one of the lights is over by Dutch Brothers. That intersection right there is, I find it terrifying in a car if I'm trying to get onto Main Street. And I was walking across and I was like, I think I'll be okay. And then the car was driving, waiting for me to cross, and they were turning and they're like, go. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm glad I'm an adult. I just feel for the teens that have to cross there. But most of the drivers in town have been very kind to me, and I'm grateful for that. So I just want to say thanks for all that you're doing. And I love it when you guys do things that I thought of. So thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. That concludes the in-person public comments, I believe. Do we have anybody on Zoom?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, well then that closes citizens' communications. That brings us consent agenda. Any council member believes an item needs to be withdrawn from the consent agenda?
Second.
I have a motion from council member Cortez and a second from Ferrer. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Takes us to the business portion of the meeting. Have we had any communications to be presented to council regarding business?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. So then I will hand it over, I believe. Who gets the? Mr. Is it Sam?
Sam
I'll
coming
take
to
it
the
away,
honors tonight.
I guess. Yeah, get comfortable, get a neck pillow or something. We're going for a ride. Annual code review. I'm gonna just summarize these and try to put it into plain language as much as possible, because I know it's super some of this is really technical. And feel free to interrupt me as I'm going through this if you have any questions.
Are we gonna put them on the screen so the public can see as you go over them?
If someone wants, I
mean-
don't have my computer, but if someone wanted to pull up the staff report, we could do that.
I mean, he's gonna review all of it.
I'm gonna just go over the table on the first couple pages. So Title III, these are changes that will allow a developer to use their impact fee credits on a project. Typically, impact fee credits are paid at the time of a building permit. What this would do is allow that payment to occur at the time of an occupancy permit. So there's certain projects where a builder, for example, may build a street that's creditable. They typically couldn't use that on their project. This allows them to use those credits for their project. There'd be no net loss to the city. It's just a timing thing.
You're hard to hear. No,
Okay.
he's not talking. Yeah,
I'll try to talk louder. Is that okay? Or get closer to the mic? There's also a request from the Battleground School District. In our code, apparently there's other jurisdictions that have this, that require the school district to annually update their school impact fees. That actually doesn't happen in practice, and it's not required. So we're requesting changes that would not require an annual review of school impact fees. The dangerous dog requirement fixes an error in our code to make a bond requirement to 250,000. It's currently in there, but there's also a reference that says 50,000. So this fixes an oversight couple oversights in titles, spelling errors in titles 8, 9. And then in 10, we get into some more, some changes to our parking standards. The first change introduces a paragraph for our parking chapter. And then some of the changes will propose parking limits no longer than 4 hours in our city parking lots, as well as our EV charging stations. And then in our industrial districts, we'll be limiting semi, tractor truck and commercial parking to no more than 4 hours. That was currently at 12 hours. For example, along Commerce Avenue, that's going to go down to 4 hours. Moving on to Title 12. This has to do with our traffic capacity and concurrency. I won't explain that right now, but we're making some minor fixes to make our code match with how we currently practice and interpret our code. But no real substantive changes in there. The next several changes similar to impact fees for streets that would apply to water, sewer, and storm. So that all be under titles 13. The building code section, we're just clarifying a reference to the ICC. And then the density transfer provisions in our zoning code have been poorly written. Most developers have to call a planner to help them explain it, and sometimes I don't even know if that helps. So that's been rewritten to make that more clear. And then there's some changes to our stormwater section. And then finally, some changes to our code enforcement chapter that would add a daily monetary fee penalty for ongoing code enforcement actions that have not been taken care of. And that is it. The Planning Commission recommended approval of these changes at their last meeting. One thing the council does need to do is to schedule a public hearing date for these items, and then I'll prepare ordinances. I'd recommend October 21st for our next public hearing on this.
Any discussion from council on these specific? Go for it.
I'm trying to pull this up real quick. I thought we would have had them up. So looking at 12.120.140. Sorry, I don't have my thing isn't working to. Yeah, 12.120.140. Trying to pull it up on my phone at the same time. Do you guys have it? Trying to look at, my question is, what and where can the standards be found? Because we're adding in new wording at the very bottom. Thank you for pulling that up, whoever's doing that. And then it's 12.120.140. There you go. Procedures for capacity evaluation. And it says capacity evaluation shall be conducted and made part of the underlying land use permit decisions, which usually ends right there. And then it's adding on, obviously, the underline, and shall be based on the standards established by the city engineer. So I was just wondering, where does one go to see what those standards are? Just making sure that it's somewhere a developer or somebody can go to.
Yeah, so we have them in the engineer's office, and typically like at pre-app stage or development stage, you would get a copy of those. So essentially they tell you what you're supposed to put in your traffic study, kind of all the conditions and things you need to study. So Those
So
are
when they
available.
do the application and.
Yeah, when they go through
permit
that
request,
application
they'll be
process, they get
receiving
a
it
copy
then.
of those. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's typically the pre-app is the most common.
Okay. And then 210, my question is, why are we removing that whole ordinance?
That is a thing that was when we originally established the concurrency ordinance. It was a thing that Vancouver did. We've really never done it at this point, so it's just deleting language that hasn't been used.
Okay. And then 17.106.035. Okay, is that that whole thing maybe? 17. Yeah, 17.106 point, okay. I was wondering if we could get, if I could get some more clarity on this because it talks about, if an area is zoned and then the density transfer. And if an area is zoned R3, for example, with 10 acres, regardless of the transferable density, it didn't make sense on why the parcel, if it's been zoned as R3, you would automatically get allowed 3 units, but because of this density transfer, you'll be able to add 6 more to that zone. So I was just wondering if I can get some more clarity on how does that work? I mean,
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
clarify it.
Okay.
You won't get any more density. If you have a 10-acre parcel and your R3 zoning, your density is gonna be 30 units or lots on that parcel.
Mhm.
What density transfer allows you to do is if you have wetlands on that 10-acre parcel, say you have half of its wetlands, you can transfer a portion of that density no more than 20% to the upland portion. So what happens is your lot sizes will go down by like 80%. And it just adds a little bit more density on the buildable portions, but the overall gross density doesn't change.
Okay, because it gave an example, exactly what I gave you that says if you have the, if you scroll down, I think it's a little bit further, it gives you the example of 2 examples to help you understand. Well, not you, but the person reading it, which was me. There you go. Transferable density. For example, if a development has 2 acres of encumbered area, blah, blah, underlining zoning R3, the number of transferable lots or units is 6, obviously the 2 acres by 3 units, but then it goes further down and then it says, the site shall not exceed 120% density authorized by the underlying zone. For example, and this is in G, if the buildable portion of a site is 10 acres, I don't know if you can scroll up, whoever's doing that for a little bit. If, oh, I meant down, yes, yeah, thank you. Going, okay, there we go. And G, and the underlying zone is R3, the maximum, okay, so for example, if the buildable portion of a site is 10 acres and the underlying zoning is R3, the maximum units or density that could be received is 36 lots or units, 10 acres times 3 times the 1.2 of density transfer equals 36 units.
Okay. Key phrase, buildable portion of the site. So this is assuming you're dealing with an encumbered site. So let's say you got a 20-acre parcel, but the buildable portion is 10 acres. For that buildable portion, the density can only go up to 120%. So it can't go, it couldn't, going back to the example of
wetlands, you could have 2 of the acres go up above R3, but the total 4, you couldn't go above 12. Is that how it's been explained? Because I agree, that example is confusing because it
Right.
doesn't have the,
Cause I read it as how you were saying it, but then the example throws it off. I was like, wait, did I understand that incorrectly?
Well, I could throw out another example if that might help.
Well, I mean, I
Uh,
get it. It's just weird, yeah. But yeah, go.
But yeah, I think the key thing is we're not talking about gross acreage or gross density that's capped. It's the buildable portion
yeah.
really can only go up 120%. It can only increase in density
Okay,
an
for
additional
that.
20%
that
for
site.
that upland site.
Okay, that makes sense. So it can't go, the 100% would be what it's allotted for that acreage, but because you can't use, say, the 2 out of the 4 acres, you can move 20% of that over to the usable land. Okay,
Right, right.
okay.
Yeah,
Thank
so in
you.
that example, I didn't list the size of the gross parcel size, whether it's 40 acres, 50 acres, 100 acres. I was just focusing on that. For the buildable portion, which I kind of hypothetically said is 10 acres, that can be bumped up, another
Eh,
20%.
Okay, and sorry to waste everybody's time, but I do have one more that I was hoping to wrap my head around a little bit more in front of you guys, which was the 3.60. It's at the top. This is in regards to the school annual calculation. A letter attached to it, yeah, which I like how she said at the end, because that's what my understanding was, is that even though we're taking away this annual calculation that the school is supposed to be initially providing, even though they say it's not really something that they do, that it isn't taking away from our, yeah. I was
Well,
just.
That school impact fee is not calculated annually anyway.
Right, and yeah, because it even says down in another section that it should be, but that's why I was hoping to pull it up one more time, because I was driving over here, I was like, wait, I wanted to reread that one section that talks about, in the bottom of the letter that, she sent in from the school, she had said in another section of our code, how it was supposed to be, it doesn't take away, even though this takes away, it doesn't take away the annual impact fees we're supposed to be readdressing or reevaluating every year. We still have that in there to protect us. But I'm thinking that might be 2 different things, actually, and that's what I want to just relook at before I sign off on this and cast my vote.
Do you want me to read the quote? I think what you're referencing.
Yeah, that she had put in, yes.
Yeah,
thank
at the
you.
end, she says, please note that what would remain in code already requires an adjustment if circumstances change. So then she references 360.070 impact fee adjustment. This section says impact fee rates shall be adjusted periodically, but not more often
More
than
often a
annually
year.
to reflect changes in costs of public facilities reasonably related to new growth and development.
Right.
The related changes. So
Okay.
yeah, that would allow, essentially the city's just kind of like we're a pass-through agency. When the school needs to adjust impact fees, they come to the city, and we review those, and that typically happens every few years.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask, how often, because if we get rid of this, then, but we still have that one, it was just kind of interesting how there isn't some kind of timeline that we, are requesting them to give this. It says no more than a year, but it doesn't say you should be at least doing it every so often at, minimum, at least give us one every few years or
It's
something.
it's essentially the school district's purview, how often they want to do it. Because it does cost them money to do it. So that would really be a discussion that, the school board needs to have. How often do we want to do the school impact fee? They come to us and say, here's what school impact fee wants to be, and then we either approve it or not. But it is expensive for them to do that calculation because they have to hire a consultant, and So they don't want to do it annually and the taxpayers we don't want them to do it annually either. It doesn't change that much.
I guess I just wonder what was the purpose behind this school impact fee formula that we had this student factor and we initially did have this in there. And so what was the change? I mean, what was the purpose and the mindset behind even initially putting this into the code? Does anybody know that? No? Okay. Because right now you have the impact fee and they, can we get a little bit of information on how that works? Who determines who, because you said they have to pay for this, right? The school has
They
to pay for
determine the
this
impact fee.
to determine based on.
They do the
program.
calculation and give us the number.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
We collect the school impact fee for them and then give it to them.
Right. That's what my understanding was. Okay.
Same as
okay,
fire.
Okay.
Fire's the same way.
Okay. I just want to make sure, because we're collecting it for them and it's based on this formula. So if there's major changes
That's
from
them.
year to year, then it's just like providing a service. They're providing a service to our citizens. So if they are not meeting the criteria under this formula, it's like, well, then why are we giving you this much? Or or I know that's a weird way of putting it. Let me switch it over to, we should be like, hey, they need to be getting more. They're hurting because they haven't been updating it as often. And maybe the growth is being radically up here, but I guess that would force them to come to us and say.
You have to have,
we
there's a
want that
plan
impact
for
fee.
all of that. They have to, you can't just charge an impact fee. You have to have a plan in place saying why you need to charge that impact fee. And so that's what they have to go through. And then they'll come in and if you can figure out what it is, then great, because that math equation's like this long.
Yeah,
So
how often do we do our capital plan? Like every 5-6 years?
That's
6
about
years.
right.
So
Yeah.
the school impact fee, I believe, is tied to that as well. You have to show, I'm gonna build this building, and that doesn't change that much. And the population growth, they often factor that in and try to land in the middle.
Okay.
It's
So
just like
it,
for sewer, water.
it had been,
anything we do.
it had been a long time since it's been updated. It was just updated about 2 years ago. And it was quite a big change, but,
Okay.
but, and just, but the school impact fee total maybe pays for the land of a new school. That's about it. But, yeah, if you're gonna build a new school, the total school impact fees maybe cover the land. That's about it. So. At least previously.
So yeah, I'd just be looking for a motion to set the public hearing date if there's no other questions.
Yeah. Thank you. Second.
And could we get the titles of the codes to be updated, please?
Proposed additions and amendments to the Battleground Municipal Code on the following: Title III, Revenue and Finance; Title VI, Animals; Title VIII, Health and Safety; Title IX, Public Peace, Morals and Welfare; Title X, Vehicles and Traffic; Title 12, Streets and Sidewalks; Title 13, Water and Sewers; Title 15, Buildings and Construction; Title 17, Zoning; Title 18, Environmental Protection; and Title 20, Enforcement of Development Code.
I think I have a motion on the floor from Councilmember Cortez with a second by Councilmember Overholzer, I believe. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of setting the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Which brings us to preliminary budget, I believe.
Good evening again, council. So the council was presented the preliminary budget via email as well as in your inboxes, which serves as the official preliminary budget presentation. And we are requesting that council set the 3 public hearings being November 4th, 2024 for revenue sources, which would include property tax ordinance 2024-11 and associated fee schedule resolution 24-12. Another hearing on November 18th, 2024, preliminary budget hearing for ordinance number 2024-12. And then the final budget hearing on December 2nd, 2024 for ordinance 2024-12.
So Well, I would like a motion to move to set that public hearing for those dates minus there's one thing I would like to remove from that budget though. So I don't know the right way to do that at this point.
So that would be during the discussions that we have with the council
Go ahead.
during like the budget overview sessions, and then before it becomes adopted, you could make a motion to approve the budget
Okay.
less with this modification.
Okay.
You want to share what that is or?
What's that? Well, we had mentioned the police, and FTEs there, and also for the capital gains, there's the North Florence Park and, there, we received a grant, is my understanding, to put in some workout equipment and a playground structure when the idea of the park is more of a nature trail. And so I know there's a lot of concerned citizens wrapped around that piece and even people that walk through it. So just, yeah.
Councilmember Ferrer,
Yes.
the clerk requests clarification of the motion.
Okay. So no, yeah.
Yes.
No,
You were
that
the
was the other one.
Oh, you did.
Oh, I didn't even hear that. Oh, okay. I thought you were clearing your throat.
So Councilmember Cortez, the clerk requests clarification of the motion.
Set the public hearing for 11/4/2024 to hear public testimony regarding revenue sources and the public hearing for 11/18/24 to hear public testimony regarding the preliminary budget and a public hearing for 12/2/2024 to hear public testimony regarding the final 25 budget.
And did you have the second?
Second.
And then if I were to want to ask a question about what Victoria was talking about, is now the time? or
The
later?
motion's on the floor. We can have discussion. Yeah, dude.
So I was just curious if that was something that we would even remove from the budget since it's a grant.
That would be, again, that would be a full council discussion, which capital was on the list to discuss, which we'll be talking
Yeah.
about that
Later
at,
on.
at the next budget overview. I know we got a
We
little
didn't get
hung up on FTEs, which is fine. So that will come up and then
Okay.
the council can make a choice at that point in
Okay.
time.
It's not just me.
Okay, so any other further discussion on the motion? It's on the floor. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, public hearings are set.
Cruising through it.
And looks like next up, ordinance number 2024-23,
Good evening, council.
spreading the love around tonight.
Yeah, lots of
Everybody's getting a
ordinances.
turn.
So, good evening. Before you, we have, as you mentioned, ordinance 2024-23 for your consideration and hopefully approval. This would allow for system development charges or SDCs to be waived when being reimbursed by other non-utility funding sources. So a little bit of background. In 2021, the Washington State Department of Commerce created this program called Connecting Housing to Infrastructure Program. It's referred to as CHIP. And the purpose of this program is to fund utility improvements for affordable housing. So specifically, these grants help encourage development by offsetting costly infrastructure, specifically sewer, water or stormwater improvements, as well as system development charges. This ordinance essentially is procedural. So in order for cities, counties, service providers to be able to accept those grant funding, we have to have an ordinance in place that oversees or dictates the program. So just looking through my notes here. Again, this would not be the term waiver in this context is not that the city would not collect these funds, these system development charges. It's just that the funding source would be an approved grant from this CHIP program from the state of Washington State Department of Commerce.
Any questions?
Is this, so this CHIP funding, is that, I mean, is there a maximum? Like, or is this something that's going to be there? So, so let's say that they use up all this funding, whatever's allocated. I don't know what that may be. Maybe it's in perpetuity that this funding's gonna live, but But if they do, then do we go back and get the SDCs?
So absolutely. And to your point, the program was kind of renewed in 2023 through 2025. There's $55.5 million budgeted for grants. And so what would happen is the projects would apply. So for example, the deadline now is October 31st of this year. If that award is given up to an amount, then those funds would be reimbursed again if we have this ordinance in place to accept that. If it doesn't cover the full costs, then the applicant would need to make that whole. And again, we would not waive these system development charges if there is not a grant awarded to cover a portion or all of the costs.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I move to adopt ordinance number 2024-23 System Development Charge, SDC, waivers for affordable housing as presented.
You mean second? Yeah, can we get the title read, please?
Ordinance number 2024-23, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Battle Ground, Washington, relating to waivers of system development charges for affordable housing projects when such charges will be reimbursed by other non-utility funding sources.
And I have a motion by Councilmember DeRochers and a second by Councilmember Cortez. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Next up, resolution 24-11, fee schedule.
Good evening, council. So before you, you have the opportunity to consider the proposed 24 fee schedule addition for the public record request for body worn camera video redactions. We went live today with those video or body worn cameras, and in order to be able to recoup our costs for any sort of video redactions, we need to have a fee in the fee schedule. So that is what is before you this evening.
Motion to approve the resolution number 2411 for the fee schedule addition as you presented.
Do we have any questions? We have a motion by Councilmember Ferrer and a second by Councilmember Cortez. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Carries 7-0 unanimously. That brings us to a presentation.
Good evening, council. I'll be doing the CDBG presentation, so give me a minute to presentation. Okay, tonight I'll talk about CDBG applications for the year. I'll do some facts, some possible projects, timeline, and then question and comments. So just a reminder, CDBG funds can be used for acquisition of real property, parks and recreation facilities, street and sidewalk improvements, water and sewer improvements, cleanup of contaminated sites, and economic development assistance when that occurs within the right of way. The funding for this year is estimated to be just a little over $1 million. That's down slightly from last year. The max grant request actually went up to 400,000 this year. The minimum is 50. There's additional federal requirements if your request is over 200. And BABA, which is the Build America, Buy America Act, may be required for projects over 250,000. The grant scores out of 100 points, with 10 points being for the match. So essentially you get 1 point for every 5% of match. So if you match 50%, you would get the full 10 points. Pre-apps are due on October 31st, and then the final applications are due on December 2nd. This year, kind of going over the scoring. So those 100 points, you get 20 points for need. So it's essentially why is the project needed? 20 points for the solution, and why is that project the best solution for that problem? Outcomes, you get 10 points. So the project you're going to build, what is the specific outcomes of it? Agency capacity is 10 points. So that's kind of the agency's experience with previous projects, especially ones with federal funding. 10 points for public outreach. So having 2 public meetings gets you the full 10 points. We have the same discussion with planning commission. So we actually have 4 meetings when all is said and done. So we meet the requirement. The match, which I just talked about, equity, you get 10 points, and then timeline. So essentially how quick you can do the project. There's 10 points for that. There's also negative points this year. So if you have right-of-way acquisition where you actually displace somebody, you would lose 20 points. There's various environmental factors. So there's 3 different ones they look at. Each of those can lose up to 5 points for a total of 15. And then if you have multiple delayed projects, you lose 5 points for that. So projects must be in a low to moderate income neighborhood. On the map there, the green areas are ones that are solidly in that threshold. The ones in the yellow just meet the requirements. So under HUD's regulations, I believe it's just over 50% have to be low to moderate to count. Clark County has a special exemption that gets it down to, I believe, 47.6 or something like that. So those 2 that are there in the yellow, they are just over the county's threshold, but under the Fed threshold. Items to consider. So yellow area is more risky. So one of the, I don't know if it's new, but one of the things I learned just recently is when you go to sign the contract, and that doesn't happen until you're ready for construction. So city will go through and do the design. If there's any right-of-way needs, go through all of that. It is at that time that you sign that contract for construction that the county looks and sees if that area still meets the low to moderate income threshold. So even if we meet it now, if it takes a year to get through design and right away, that area changes and it's not anymore, then we would not be eligible for the grant and they wouldn't sign the contract with us. And so when I go through my example projects, I'll talk about that a little bit. And then the NEPA rules have become far more stringent. So again, I'll talk some about the environmental risk. Our friends from NIMS are now getting involved in HUD projects. So we'll have to consider that. So possible projects, Florence Robeson South Park improvements. The park has some underutilized areas that we could build upon from a low moderate income risk. Let's say it's low to medium. In this area, we have the subdivisions by Daybreak School. So those will tend to raise the income in this area. So it's going to kind of give it a medium. The environmental risk is low to medium. There are no environmental areas on the park site, but you can kind of see that grass area to the south. That's wetlands. So depending on how the county looks at it, that may or may be. So it's kind of the risk scores for those. Second project is Remy Park. So we have the master plan recently approved. So we have a lot of things to pick from for that park. The income risk is low. The only approved development in the area is apartments, and those tend to be low to moderate anyway. So it's not likely to move this area out of that threshold. The environmental risk is high. We've got wetlands, we've got ARCI, tons of things. So this will be a timely project or a project that takes a lot of time, and we'll definitely lose points on the environmental side in our application. My last suggestion is Grace Pathway. So our project last year was on Parkway to provide a pathway to complete. So at least one side has a full walking segment on it. This would be a similar project. Grace is about the last street we have where, major street we have where we don't have a complete pedestrian connection. So it's very similar to last year's project. The income risk is low to medium. Again, in this area, we have B&G subdivision, which has the 400 lots. Those will probably tend to be in the higher income range. So while this area is currently solidly green, if, enough of those build out before we're ready, then, that could raise that, and that might be an issue. Environmental risk can range from low to high. On the southern end of the project, we don't really have any environmental issues. As you go past 6 there, you'll hit the creek, and so that would cause us an issue. So again, I haven't proposed any phasing on this. I wanted to see if you were all interested in it before I do more of the detailed analysis. But that would be one thing to watch for, is if we get near that creek, that will absolutely trigger NIMS. So timeline, this is the initial presentation to council. We're shooting for the public hearing at the next meeting. I had my initial presentation with Planning Commission last month, and on Wednesday, I'll be doing the public hearing with them. So questions, comments, any other projects you would like me to look at, and then any thoughts on the projects I threw out there?
Could you, was there comments from Planning Commission you want to share before I go?
Yeah, so Planning Commission really liked Remy and the Grace project, so I'll be going into more detail on those two with them. They weren't as interested in Florence Robeson, but yeah, they liked the two.
I was kind of hoping for a covered basketball court at McConnell Park.
McConnell actually fell out. So last year it was an eligible area. It is not eligible this year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, get one around. Go ahead, Victoria.
So I knew you were going to come at me with some parks. But I know that this allows for other things as well. And you did say, if I've got an idea, that you could look into it. I was thinking more on the safety aspect of our citizens and looking at some pipes to be replaced. Specifically, I know we still have a little section left. I think that would go with the equity, but I could be wrong. We still have a little bit of, I didn't want to say it out loud, but some lead piping, trying to get that removed.
We currently don't have any lead piping that we're aware of. Are you talking about the AC pipe?
I don't know, we were having a conversation several months back, and we were talking about lead pipes, and I was asking, because I think we were talking about water, and it would led to me asking, well, do we have any lead pipe still? And you mentioned a little section that was left. So, no?
Yeah,
Back
we
in
don't,
there-
we don't
'cause
have,
some very outdated areas. I mean,
we do. So we've, not to get too far off topic, but there's a federal law that requires us to look at lead service lines. We've gone through for the year and did all the samples that we needed to, and we at this point have not found any lead in the water,
Okay.
in the water, pipe. We have AC, which is what we've been working on replacing. But I'm not aware of any lead pipe in the system.
okay.
Yeah, AC's that's the pipe on Grace that we've replaced for the last couple of years. Not sure.
Are you good?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, well, I see he's looking for some direction on which of those three projects or so.
Okay.
As well as, couple EV parking spots, that kind of stuff. So I'd be interested to see what that looks like.
Yeah.
Sounds like it'd have a great impact to the individuals in that area.
I agree with Councilmember Cortez on the fact that Remy seems like a great start, simply because we have the apartment, right there. And it would go with what maybe the requirements that fall underneath this grant. My other concern, that I liked how the Planning Commission, I agree with them as well about the Grace. I would love to see for the BG Village, especially, we have a lot of retired older community over there, and they would love to have a sidewalk, a safe area to walk all the way from their resident to, the grocery store or wherever that is. So I might be more inclined for that one, since you did say Remy for the environment portion could be a little high
Yeah, time consuming will be.
and
definitely-
time consuming. Yeah. And I didn't catch the requirements on when, because you said we get extra points or 10 points, right? If we can get this done faster than later. So do we know, looking at those two, which one could be done faster? Which I know is very gray.
Yeah, the pathway would be, just because of the environmental at Remy, the pathway will go faster.
Okay.
North. Yeah, on the south side, that's already covered by the Grace
That's what I
Avenue
was wondering
extension.
about that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
so
it's
this is
north.
north. This is going north from Main Street towards like 10th and Grace.
I think it might be beneficial to bring that map. I know I asked this question a couple years ago and you mapped out all the non-connected sidewalks, the north-south arterials. And I know that's why I brought up the pathway on Parkway last year. And this was the last one. There was a citizen that reached out about Grace, which is why I think this made the list. So Councilmember Overholzer.
Thank you, Mayor McCoy. I agree with the planning commission in that, Remy and Grace seem like two home runs. We can apply for both, correct?
Say that again.
Can we apply for both of those projects?
Yeah, so when you apply, they would like you to make like this is my primary, this is my
Awesome.
secondary, but yes, you can apply for.
So
multiple.
for me, Remy is a key park in that area. We don't have a whole lot of parks down in that area of town, and with the apartment buildings being there, a lot of children, and in the neighboring unit over off of 20th, there's a lot of children that I think would benefit from that park. But I also see the benefit of Grace and having a continuous pathway on that side of the road for the seniors. So I would put Remy and then Grace is my 1 and 2. That's my personal opinion. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we have any more areas that we need sidewalks? Like I was thinking did a bunch behind, like Rocky, Celeste Schwab, that whole area. Did we finish all those areas out to get sidewalks in?
We have kind of behind Rockies, we have, I believe, a full path from 15th to 20th. So you kind of go down 4th and then up, obviously into the neighborhood. There isn't, but there's at least a main stretch through there that has a full all the way.
Cause I'm thinking if there's anything, I just go back to riding the bus and going on the tour with everybody and we're like, hey, we want to park, and Ridgefield's like, we got a dirt road and we want a sidewalk to let a kid walk to school. That, it gets kind of hard sometimes. It's like, oh, all we got is like, we just, so that's the only thing is I think sometimes it can, it can look a little bit like, oh, we don't have anything else, so let's just throw out a park.
The census tracks, that's what Ridgefield and Camas are running into. They don't have any tracks that qualify. So Camas didn't even put in last year, and Ridgefield had to do a survey to get their one project in. That's why I asked to have 2 projects come forward, because I believe there's potential of us getting both.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the municipalities are no longer qualifying for this. So I know it's more work, but I appreciate it. But the eyeball test, if you want to call it, like what you're talking about, I don't think it's as important as it used to be, and they don't do the tour. So it's just, you get the survey, you score them. They don't do a tour anymore. So
Yeah, I haven't been on a tour
no,
in
there's
several
no
years.
tour, and then it comes before the CDBG, which we have a spot on that committee. And even based on those numbers, we can still change the order if we have support from the rest of that board. And right now, the city projects are getting kind of usurped by other community projects that aren't necessarily parks and sidewalks. So I'm going to make a strong case that cities get funded first before some of the other issues that can be funded in other buckets, in my opinion. So that's why I think 2 projects going forward would be my preference.
I don't have a problem with the 2 projects. I just want to make sure that we don't have other.
We pass the eyeball test.
That is even from the community, right? Because we get grant money and we got grant money, we went and fixed this park, and they're like, well, what about our park that we've been asking for forever? And it's really hard to tell them, well, guess what, your neighborhood's a little bit too hoity-toity and that's why we couldn't do it, and so you've got to
take the money where you get it, though.
So
I think it would be easy to get those points for the benefit, for that Remy too. Might be easier for that one.
Do we in consensus on those 2 projects? Good with everybody? You got what
Yeah,
you
so at my next presentation, I'll give a little more details, some possible suggestions on what we should put in, what our match should be, those sorts of things.
Yeah, and maybe on that, Grace, like you talked about phases and, maybe you can have one phase that matches gets you under the.
Yep.
So 200,000 when we hit it again next year. Okay, I believe that ends that portion. We're on to administrative reports.
Just one thing real quick. Last week, I spoke with a few of you about trying to get support for moving forward with a position that's not funded yet. So earlier, Megan was speaking with you about these three additional positions, one being the records specialist for police. And it was something that council discussed and agreed to when the rollout of the body worn cameras came about. Well, that's today. And I'd like to get consensus or at least support or a head nod to allow us to go ahead and advertise the position as soon as possible. This is a civil service position. It's going to take a good 2 months before we can actually try to onboard someone. We're not asking for an amendment in the budget. We do think we could get someone and bring them in January 1, but it's going to take time. And in the meantime, you still have the existing staff now dealing with these additional body worn camera requests. So just wanting to make sure there's support from council to at least advertise it here in the next couple weeks.
Any heartburn from council on trying to fill a position straight away on January 1st instead of waiting 2 months? All right, I'm hearing consensus to advertise for the position.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Next up is council communications. Anybody else want to start with council communications? I just have one. Sure, go for it.
So as we've been talking about the emergency shelters, and the grant that we have, November 7th, I'm going to be meeting with that pastors group, to present that and see what kind of agreements we might be able to make for, local, faith-based organizations and churches to open up their doors to add to the list on top of the community center and the library, to, have more availability and flexibility in being able to shelter people in, tough situations during extreme weather. So that's all I got.
All right, thank you for doing that. You wanted me to go first, is that what you said? Okay. Okay. I got, as I sent out an email earlier today, just to give you a heads up that I did get a call from the YMCA. They're selling that property that they had originally planned to build a YMCA on. So basically how I took that conversation is this will pretty much close the chapter on having a YMCA in Battleground if this property sells, because they got it for a good deal and they're going to use the proceeds to build the facility in municipalities that are, or have either
Not ours.
fundraised or other ones other than us. So, if that's, this council it's been brought before us many times, but I felt that it was important to share the information so that we're all on the same page. And also maybe, so the community knows as well. So I didn't want to come as a surprise.
So I was just gonna add that when Erin was here, I talked with her, had an idea of where if somehow the city could buy the property from the YMCA and then lease it back to them for $1 a year. And she said she brought it forward and they were not interested. And Megan, you said agreed to that. But they've said they've never heard that from us, that
Well,
they never heard we were interested in doing anything or even talking about it.
I broached that with one of the directors of the YMCA and asked that question, if we were to do that, would that, with no like firm commitment on their part, would that like maybe get the ball rolling or get it very well started? And this gentleman said it would. So we've got some different messages from that. So that was confusing for me to hear But I mean, if that's something that council wants to look into, we can look into it, but we would have to do it sooner rather than later. And I don't know if there's council will to do that.
Right, and I think that their lot's not subdivided or anything yet, so they have
They're dividing it now.
Okay, so yeah, they just wanted to.
So if that's something that I just bring that up, if that's something that council wants to talk about or revisit, you may be getting some questions from citizens. So just so you're aware, it's nothing that I have on the agenda coming forward. So if it's, they do. So you're probably gonna,
I mean, buying the property was like.
you're
the
not gonna
best-
find a property for cheaper than, yeah.
Well, and it was like the best case scenario because we didn't have to worry about gifting public funds because we'd be leasing it to them.
I mean, at the end of the day, it will take some political will, and if this body has it and they want to discuss it, let me know. We'll put it on the agenda. If not, it will just be up for sale. Fair enough? Fair enough.
I mean, do we have interest in bringing it back? Talk about
I'm
it?
sorry, what?
Are you asking us now if we have interest in having them talk about it?
Get hold of him anytime for the next meeting when he sets the agenda. We'd be happy to put it on the agenda.
Okay, well, I'm interested now, so
Yeah.
there's my message.
We're not gonna, we're not gonna, vote on it now. It's not on the agenda. So it's just a discussion point. So everybody knows and the public knows that, if you want to write a check, now would be the time.
Are they coming in? Is the Y gonna come?
I have not talked to the Y. I just got a phone call today. I mean, I've talked to a volunteer that fundraised for the Y that's been very involved in it. They're going down this road and I felt it important to share. That's about the extent of the conversations.
Cause that's what I want to know with them wanting to bring it back. Are we just bringing it back for us to talk about? Are we gonna bring the Y in? What are we doing?
Well, I would want to end result for the reason to have it on the agenda.
I mean, yeah.
Only if this body is willing to put, I don't want to bring the
We're
Y
not
in here
interested.
and waste it. We can have the conversations you want me to start and find out, but I mean, we're up against it time wise.
I personally, I mean, it's 14 years that the Y has been supposedly coming to Battleground. And I would personally rather have staff deal with them and find out what the exact thing is, because I don't think they have any money. I don't think they have, and I don't think our $1 million to buy a piece of property is gonna change the fact that they would have money to put into it. And so that was always the case is, you know, we put up money and whatever it was, when we originally talked this, Adrian, you remember that it was 7.5 million and we were gonna put up half of it, they were gonna put up half of it, but there was no commitment. Just only from us, so it could have been a $4 million project because they didn't have the money. And that's what I would like to know is similar to the state, are we last money in? Or are we still first money? And that could be staff, it could be you finding that out, but if we're gonna talk it again, we need to know.
We need to have some firm numbers and a firm commitment. I agree.
Yeah, because if we go spend $1 million and the YMCA still doesn't come, there'll be 7 new council members here in 2 years.
Well, I mean, there's positives there too. All right, so hearing no other council communications, meeting's adjourned at 8:33 PM. Yeah.